Alrighty. With that, I think we're ready to move on to our main program for this evening. So many of you, I'm sure, know Mr. 84R Mike there from our boring Thursday evening nets on 10 meters. Probably heard his voice plenty, and look forward to hearing him talk right now about volcanoes. This is a follow-on to a presentation previously given. However, I don't think it's necessary that you had to see the previous presentation, but it should be very educational either way. Oops, sorry about that. And so with that, let me let Mike go ahead and take it over and start telling us a bit more about some volcanoes.
Okay, well, thanks everyone for attending this this talk. I'll try to get right into it. Not going to be educational though. I hope it'll be entertaining. Okay, well, this is sort of part two. I talked to you about volcanoes in August of 2018, and I have a little bit of update. I'm going to go over a little bit of material I did before, which is basically how to talk about volcanoes, and then I'm going to offer you some volcanoes to keep an eye on, keep an ear open for in the years just ahead. Please remember that I'm not a scientist, I'm not a volcanologist, I'm a radio amateur, and this is entertainment, and I hope it's not too boring. Let's get right into it. There are two types of volcanoes very generally. There's effusive and explosive. Effusive volcanoes dump out lava in large quantities. The lava is fluid. It flows. It even fountains. And in general, effusive volcanoes are pretty benign. The vast majority of volcanoes are explosive. In those, the lava is thick. They have gigantic explosions. They're very dangerous. They have very bad effects. And I'm going to talk about those mainly. Starting right off with Volcano Explosivity Index. This is how scientists rate explosive volcanoes. The rating is from 0 to 8. Zeros are, in truth, effusive volcanoes that don't explode, and the 8s are supervolcanoes. And in between, there's a logarithmic scale of explosivity. And you can see on the right symbols that show the relative measure of tephra ejected from a volcano. The tephra is stuff. I'll cover that more specifically, a little more specifically in just a minute. On the right, on the left, you see some examples of VEIs 2 through 8. The 4 may be unfamiliar to you. That's the Iceland volcano in 2010 that interrupted air traffic for a while. Well, in the United States, here's the question: why do we have lots of volcanoes in southern Alaska and the Aleutian chain, and lots of volcanoes along the west coast of the United States, but no volcanoes anywhere else, except for one really big one in Wyoming and several in the Hawaiian Islands? Why? Well, here are the places that volcanoes come from. A very nice chart that's got a lot of science on it, but all I really want to say is that volcanoes can come from oceanic rifts where the tectonic plates move apart, and the hot upwelling mantle can slip through and form volcanoes. Iceland is a good example of that. There are hotspot volcanoes where the mantle manages to burn its way through the Earth's crust and form volcanoes, typically on the seabed. The Hawaiian Islands volcanoes are very good examples of hotspots. Most of the volcanoes in the world are subduction volcanoes, which everybody here knows about the interaction of tectonic plates. But when an oceanic plate dives under a continental plate, there's heat released, and that heat manages to find its way up to the Earth's crust, burns holes in it, and forms volcanoes. Well, let's talk a bit about volcano effects. We have to start with lava. Lava is the molten rock that comes out of the Earth and appears on the Earth's surface. Shown here 2 years ago in Hawaii, there were lava flows and even lava fountains. The other term to remember is magma. Magma is molten rock that's under the surface of the Earth. It's what comes up to provide the spectacular effects that volcanoes provide. Magma is molten rock. So good to remember those two terms, magma and lava. They're the obvious difference is that magma is below the Earth's surface and lava is on top of it. Well, where does magma come from? Well, I showed you a while ago it came from the Earth's mantle, but it collects in large pools that are way below the surface of the ground. It shows 1 to 10 kilometers, but sometimes much deeper than that. And this lava, this magma, is under very high pressure. It puts that pressure against the rocks of the Earth's structure, and it manages to break through the rocks and find its way to the surface. The rocks fracture, and those fractures are what we hear as volcanic earthquakes. That's how scientists figure out that a volcano may be about to erupt. All right. Well, this picture shows volcanic ash in great quantity coming out of Mount St. Helens, or as I call it, St. Helens Volcano in 1980. And the ash is, when you look at it, it appears to be like soft powder, but it's really not. It's rock and mixed with glass. That glass is quite sharp. The inset picture shows a piece of volcanic ash, and you can see how sharp those edges must be. The ash is very abrasive, very bad for engines, and it's very harmful for lungs and eyes. You don't want to get it on you or in you. Well, this is the most terrifying volcano effect that I can think of, and it's pyroclastic flow. I showed this slide 2 years ago, and it's so good I had to show it again. This is from the Pinatubo VI6 eruption in Philippines in 1991. And it shows a wall of this pyroclastic gas and debris coming at very high speed toward the camera. It was a prize-winning photograph, and maybe the part of the prize was that the guy was able to escape. I just don't know how he did it. This looks like it's coming at terrifyingly fast rate, and I can imagine that the people in the truck didn't make it. Anyway, that's pyroclastic flows, kills and destroys everything in its path. Another thing that does that is our lahars that are typically mixtures of volcanic ash and rain or snowmelt. When a volcano erupts, it melts the snow, or it mixes with rain that might just be falling, and comes down the mountain at very high speed. It's like volcanic mud with the consistency of concrete, and it comes along at about 25 miles an hour, and it smashes and kills everything in its way. I'll talk a little bit more about lahars with respect to one of our favorite volcanoes here in a little while. And here's finally Tephra. Tephra is everything that comes out of a volcano and ends up on the ground. And you can see this example from the twin volcanoes Tarverver and Vulcan in Rabaul. Everybody know where Rabaul is? As DXers, we ought to know. Anyway, this this stuff collects on the ground, and you can see it. It gets rained on and turns into very, very difficult to handle mud, volcanic mud. Another thing that very large volcanoes do is they make calderas. I talked about craters, volcanic craters, where the lava comes out, but the caldera is a depression, something that results when a volcanic magma chamber is depleted. The weight of the volcano on top of the earth that is over the magma chamber caves in the magma chamber, and the result is a massive depression over the magma chamber. It's like the whole top of a volcanic mountain falls in. And that's what we see here, an example from Oregon, Crater Lake, a VEI-7 eruption many years back that produced this caldera that filled up with rainwater. And you can see in the caldera that the mountain is trying to grow back. The magma chamber is refilling, and it's pushing up on the bottom of the caldera. And eventually it breaks the surface, as this one has, with a volcanic cone, and this eventually will become the top of the mountain that restores itself for another round of eruptions. Okay, well, let's talk about the volcanoes that were happening in 2018 and since then. Lots of volcanoes have erupted, but except for Kīlauea, these are the ones that really kill people. First of all is Fuego. Fuego is a typical volcano in Guatemala. It's very active. It has a long history of eruptions, mainly medium to small. On June 3rd, 2018, Fuego erupted. What's probably going to be scored as a VEI-3, which is pretty typical. This volcano sent down a very heavy ashfall and pyroclastic flows that came screaming down the mountain and hit hard the villages, farms, and communities down around the base of the mountain. There were quite a number of people, over 300 people killed and still missing as a result of this volcano. It's a very, very bad volcano. It's erupting now, which is why I show a red alert status for Fuego. It's not a good place to go for retirement, I can tell you that. All right. As you remember, 2 years ago, Kīlauea was erupting. It was all in the news. It was the effusive eruption that I showed on the second slide, where lots of lava was coming out of the mountain. About the time that I finished talking about it, it stopped erupting, and it hasn't erupted since. It's sleeping. It's not active. It erupted for 35 years, and now it's not. Meanwhile, just up the hill from there, its big sister, Mauna Loa. Mauna Loa is the largest active volcano on Earth. Anyway, that one has been given a yellow alert status because of earthquakes that are coming from under the summit of Mauna Loa. Anyway, we were talking about the very effusive eruptions of Kīlauea from a rift zone several miles down slope from the summit of Kīlauea. There, through cracks in the earth, the lava started flowing out. There were about 20 fissures, as they were numbered, but fissure 8 was the most prolific. You can see here that lava came out of fissure 8 and flowed generally downhill in several directions. and eventually wound up in the sea. Much of it did, and in fact increased the shoreline there. It filled in some bays and actually extended the coast of the Big Island. Now, some of those extensions may eventually fall off and go down into the abyss, but this is how the Big Island, and in fact all the Hawaiian Islands, were built through eruptions like this. Well, let's walk a few miles upslope to get to the summit of Kīlauea. The summit was a lot of you have seen the summit of Kīlauea. There was a big caldera there, and in one side of the caldera there was a hole in the earth. That was the crater. That was the Halea Ma'u crater. At the bottom of the crater was a lava pool. It was live lava down there, and sometimes the level of the lava pool would raise all the way up to the top, and you could see the flames coming up from the live lava. And at night you could see the glow from the lava, even if it was pretty far down. Well, all that was from a magma chamber that drained out. All the magma that was in the magma chamber deep underground, deep under Kīlauea, drained out through Fissure 8. And as a result, there was nothing to hold up the caldera, so it collapsed. And you can see here the effects of that collapse. It looks like a funnel-shaped crater in the middle of the collapsed caldera. That's actually an enormous funnel-shaped crater, and the pond that formed down in the bottom of it from rainwater is the very first lake that's ever been known to form in the caldera or the crater of Kīlauea. And it's gotten bigger since this picture was taken at the end of May. That water is actually pretty hot. You wouldn't want to stick your toe into it. It's also filled with chemicals. But the USGS and the Park Service keep very close tabs on the status of Kīlauea. Kilauea's crater is now choked with debris and now plugged with water. So the gases can't escape, the pressure can't be relieved. And so the future of Kīlauea is what is on a lot of people's minds. Will it eventually become an explosive volcano? It has been in the past. So for those of you who plan to live a long time, I hope you can. I hope you'll see what happens with Kīlauea when it becomes active again. For guys like me, I don't think we're going to make it. All right. Another volcano that I talked about way back last summer or 2 summers ago was the very infamous Krakatoa or Krakatoa. This is one of the most infamous volcanoes that on Earth that there's ever been. This one is a great killer. In 1883, the island that the volcano was in blew up. The entire island vanished in a great titanic explosion that destroyed not only the island, but lots underneath it. It was the loudest recorded sound in history. The shock waves from the explosion traveled worldwide several times, and worst of all, the explosion triggered enormous tsunamis that went across and impacted the coastline that you see on this map. In addition to that, the tsunamis killed about 30,000 people. In addition to that, a pyroclastic flow went roaring across the sea surface and impacted the islands and killed another 6,000 people. It's a terrible, terrible, terrible event. Well, I told you that the island was completely destroyed, and it was. and that was in 1883. But in about 1928 to 1930, the island resurfaced. It had been building itself up underwater until finally it resurfaced. Just came out of the surface with fire and smoke. And since then, it's built itself up into this monster. At least it was in October 2018. This, as you can see, there's a very steep cone. My friend Dave used the term angle of repose, and it's certainly relevant here. Engineers will look at that and they'll say, ooh, and wonder if that thing is stable. Well, it wasn't. And here's the result. On December 22nd, 2018, that ash cone collapsed. 2/3 of the island slipped off of what you see here and fell into the abyss, into the caldera deep underwater. And that landslide caused another tsunami that went to those islands and coastlines that you saw and killed over 400 people. It wreaked great destruction on the little communities right along the beach. Anyway, so today, I don't have a picture of Krakatoa today, but it's rebuilding itself slowly. It's on an orange alert status, minor activity. Well, Krakatoa for sure is going to rebuild itself. It should take another 50 years before it reaches the profile shown here on the old summit, but you can bet it'll keep going long after that. Hopefully this won't kill any more people during the time that all of us have left on Earth. And then last December, there was a terrible thing that happened on a small volcanic island near New Zealand. You can see a map of New Zealand here with volcanoes marked. North Island has by far the most of them, studded with volcanoes, including gigantic Popo, the last supervolcano to erupt, and it was like 26,000 years ago. That's before the human experience. So we haven't had a supervolcano since then, but Popo has been real busy erupting big time since then, and some of the others as well. White Island is the one we're interested in. It was a VEI2 in December 2019, or that's what I've decided it was. This is what White Island looks like. It's an island, a volcanic island, and the caldera for it is breached, as they say. It's open to the sea, and that little beach that you see to the left, to the right, is where tourists can get off of boats and walk up into the caldera. Why would they do that? Why would they do that? Well, it's to see this. This is what they went up there to see. And there were a whole bunch of them up there when the volcano exploded. This is what it looked like from a boat just offshore, the explosion of the volcano. And what you see coming over the edge of the caldera there is pyroclastic flow. That's coming straight at the boat. And you can imagine what it was like on the boat when they saw that. And what I've read is that the boat skippers ran everybody below decks and put that boat into gear and took off at high speed. Anyway, this is what the lucky tourists saw. The unlucky tourists that were still in the caldera, they weren't so fortunate. 21 ended up being dead, 25 very badly injured. You remember last December when when New Zealand authorities were begging for skin grafts? Well, we don't need to see that. Finally, in January of this year, there was Taal volcano that erupted. This picture is a satellite view of the southwest corner of the big island of Luzon, and at the top in the middle you can see Manila. Metro Manila, a very, very densely packed city of millions of people. And only 40 or 50 miles south of there is a gigantic caldera. Lake Taal is filled, the caldera is filled with water. It's Lake Taal. And in the middle of Lake Taal is an island, Volcano Island. This is a better view of Volcano Island. This was before the eruption of January 2020. You can see it's all covered with trees and vegetation. There's some old extinct cones, volcanic cones on the island. This is the second most active volcano in the Philippines. It has lots of historical eruptions and many long before that. This is a picture of the eruption on January 12th. I think it'll eventually be scored a VEI 3. It was mostly over by 2 weeks later, but it's still, the earthquakes underneath the Taal are still cracking the earth. So Taal's eruption of 2020 may not be over. I think it'll be a while though before she erupts again. Let's see, 39 people lost their lives. Most of them were from heart attacks and from traffic accidents, things like that that were associated, indirect causes of the indirect results of the volcano. But there was the poor and middle class communities that surround Lake Taal. They were really, really devastated by the ash fall. It was very bad. Their crops were ruined. Their livestock was destroyed. They were displaced for weeks out of their homes. When they got home, their homes had been collapsed by the weight of the ash. It was very, very sad time. But not so sad was this event. This was a wedding that was taking place when the volcano erupted, and might be the most famous wedding photo of all for that event. And I kind of think it'll probably be end up being one of the famous wedding photos of all time. I only hope that the happy couple was able to make it out of the area and go on a happy honeymoon someplace where the volcano wasn't covering everything with ash. Well, that catches you up on the bad volcanoes of the last couple of years. Not all of them, there were others, but those are my choices. Now I'm going to give you my choices of the volcanoes that I think you should anticipate more news from. Not entirely catastrophic news, but I think you'll be hearing about these volcanoes in future. I rather hope not, but I expect you will, at least some of them. By the way, this is El Popo, the big volcano in Mexico. It's 45 miles southeast of Mexico City. As you can see, it's got a snowy top on it, even though it's that far south. It's a constant erupter. It's erupting now, but typically its eruptions are like 1 to 3, VEI 1 to 3. Well, this is the first one I want to show you, and I talked about this one in the previous talk. This is one I think is, I know is a proven killer all the way from Roman times and before that. It's erupted often, very often, and sometimes really big. In Roman times, it was a VEI 5. It's gone off VEI 5 once or twice since then, but most of them are 3s and 4s. In any case, you can see, just looking at the crater of the volcano, that the lower lip is on the side of the communities that are built up along the Bay of Naples, and you can, at least I can imagine, pyroclastic flows coming over the edge of that crater and rocketing downhill down toward the coastline you see in the foreground. It's just unimaginably horrible to even think about. Anyway, This one has been quiet since 1944. It was a VEI 4 in 1944 during the middle of World War II, actually. And she's green right now. She's not. There's no eruption in the immediate future, but keep an eye and an ear open for Vesuvius, a proven killer. Now that's fine for Naples, except for one little tiny thing, and that is Campi Flegrei. Campi Flegrei is an even bigger volcano than Vesuvius. Campi Flegrei is a slow burner, though. Campi Flegrei erupted VEI 7 in prehistoric times, long time ago. And it hasn't erupted but once in historic times, and that was in 1538 when there was a VEI 3 eruption. Well, Naples wasn't all that big back in 1538, but it's an enormous city now, and you can imagine, well, at least I can imagine, what a VEI 3 eruption right in the middle of that red circle would be like for the people of Naples. But it could be worse, because that caldera, it's a caldera that extends out into the bay. That caldera is in an uplift cycle. The Earth is physically rising up inside that caldera. The Italian volcano authorities are worried about it, as well they might be. And I refer you to an excellent New York Times article dated November 14th, 2018. That was a full-page feature on Campi Flegrei. So take a look at that if you're interested. I think you'll find it quite interesting. In the meantime, please choose someplace else to go for your vacation. Now let's step out in the Atlantic, and that means stepping out to Iceland for volcanoes. Iceland is a volcano island, another volcano island, much bigger. Iceland is covered with volcanoes, both active and extinct. The most active of all is Grímsvötn. I hope that's the way it's pronounced. Grímsvötn is now very active with earthquakes. The volcano people on Iceland think that Grímsvötn is going to erupt again soon. It erupted VEI 4 not all that long ago, 2011. And that's pretty short for recovery time for a volcano. In 1783, it went VEI 6 and devastated England and Northern Europe. Well, anyway, this is a pretty easy call for me to make on the next big thing coming from Iceland volcanoes. I like this picture. The volcano itself is just a hole in a glacier. A glacier lies over the volcano, so when it erupts, it just pokes its ash cloud up through the hole in the glacier. All right, I'll now go to the Pacific, and we're going to take a tour around the Pacific Rim. And the first volcano I was going to predict would be bad for you was Sinabung in Indonesia. The Indonesian archipelago is full of active volcanoes. I think the number is about 127 active volcanoes along that archipelago. And Sinabung itself was asleep for 400 years. And then in 2010, it woke up with a fairly small eruption. I think it was a VEI 4. And since then, it's been erupting at like 1 to 3 or 4. And then on Monday of this week, it blew up. If it had waited until next Monday, you all would have said, whoa, that Mike Stussy really guessed that one. But this one blew up on Monday of this week. And in fact, it's still erupting. This one, I think, is going to turn out to be a VEI 4, but maybe not. And it may not be done. And we may not have seen the biggest part of it either. So keep your ears open for news from Indonesia on Sinabung volcano. the authorities have seen fit to give it an orange, even though it's erupting as we speak. It should be a red. All right, let's keep going up the Pacific Rim. We're in Philippines again, and this is the most active volcano in the Philippines. It's Mayon. Mayon has a perfect cone. It is so beautiful. Tourists travel to take pictures of the Mayon volcano. But it's really active, and it's also a killer. There are towns and farms and communities all the way around Mayon, and a lot of people look at the slopes of that volcano and they think angle of repose. What's going to happen if Mayon has what's called a flank collapse? That's what happened to St. Helens. It suffered a flank collapse. The volcano erupted right out the side, and if that happens, one of these unlucky villages, some of these unlucky farms are really going to be unlucky. Anyway, Mayon, keep that name in mind. All right, let's go on up the Pacific Rim to Japan. Japan has got so many volcanoes. I'm sure all of you know that Mount Fuji is itself a volcano, a live volcano. Anyway, but there's a lot of islands, Pacific islands, that belong to Japan, and they're volcanic too, most of them. And this is one. This is Ioto. Ioto was formerly called Iwo Jima, an island that the U.S. Marine Corps stormed in 1945. And this is Mount Suribachi, the place that the Marines went up and planted the flag. Anyway, Suribachi is an extinct cone of the volcano, which is a massive thing coming up from the seabed. It's since 1945, it has risen what I say 17 to 20 meters higher than it was when the Marines landed. And so what would cause an island like this to raise itself up so high? And the answer has to be that its magma chamber is filling and swelling, pushing the island up further out of the water. This island has the potential for a VEI-7 eruption, and it could happen relatively soon. I hope not, because what would result is some powerful tsunamis that would go out from the island, head toward mainland Japan or China or Taiwan, or maybe off in the other direction toward the Hawaiian Islands. Anyway, this is a disaster waiting to happen, and I hope it doesn't happen, but I want you to know about it. Okay, well, going further around the Pacific Rim, we come to the Aleutian Islands. The Aleutian Islands are studded with volcanoes, active and extinct, and you see them there. Over 40 active ones, and most of their eruptions are, relatively small, and sometimes they're not even detected unless some airliner flies over and reports them. And really, who cares? There are very few people that live out there, and the ones that do live out there know how to stay clear of the eruptions. But there have been some really, really big ones out there too. In 1912, the largest volcanic eruption of the 20th century and the 21st, and in fact since Krakatoa in 1883, came right out of the ground near the Katmai volcano, and that was called Nova Erupta, and I showed you pictures of that in the last talk. But there have been others. Recently in the news, there was a feature about a big volcano somewhere in the world having affected the Romans and the Egyptians in 43 BC. Well, that was most likely from Okmok, an island in the Aleutians that has two big calderas. Akmak went VEI 6 in 43 BC. Now let's talk about the United States. Alaska is the United States, but now let's talk about the Pacific Northwest, specifically the Cascade Range, which has 10 active volcanoes. And you know these pretty well. The most active one of this group is St. Helens. St. Helens, of course, had the VEI 5 eruption in 1980. That's the largest one that I'm aware of in the continental United States since prehistoric times, and I couldn't tell you when the last one was, or what it was, or where it was. Anyway, the other one that is considered dangerous, more dangerous, is Rainier. Rainier overlooks the Seattle-Tacoma area. There are a lot of towns and communities stretching out from the base of Rainier. Rainier has no historic eruptions that I could find, maybe a few small ones. This is a closer look at Rainier. And this picture is really good because it shows the glaciers that are on top of Rainier really well. It has 25 glaciers up there, and those glaciers are really heavy. So the big threat from Rainier is Lahars. Lahars from melting glaciers, either from eruptions or from just sliding down the mountain and thawing out as they go and producing gigantic lahars. There's historical evidence, prehistorical evidence of massive lahars reaching all the way to Puget Sound. Anyway, the local authorities have prepared the best they can. They have evacuation plans and routes and everything all plotted out. Let's hope that none of that is ever needed during our lifetimes. At least you know, though, there's a big threat there. Speaking of big eruptions, this is the one I chose in Central America. There were so many. It was a really difficult choice, and I waited right up till the end to finalize on Santa Maria. And really, Santa Maria is an excellent historic choice. Santa Maria went VEI 6 in 1902, an enormous eruption, one that devastated the area, even though it's quite rural, and third largest since Krakatoa in 1883, third largest in the 20th century. Anyway, you can see that Santa Maria suffered a flank collapse. The whole face of this beautiful conical mountain was blown off in the eruption. You can see the rock strata and everything else there. In 1922, a new thing came out of the crater for Santa Maria. It's called a lava cone, and its name is Santiaguito. Santiaguito is very much the son of Santa Maria. Santiaguito is erupting almost constantly. It's erupting now, and it's producing more and more lava and pyroclastic flows that come down and build what looks like a new mountain in the next to the broken face of its mother, Santa Maria. And over time, Santiaguito is going to build and build. And you may even hear about some of its eruptions. I don't think they'll be very big, but I just thought this was a fascinating situation for this talk. I was interested, and I hope you find it too. Well, we're almost done with the tour around the Pacific Rim. We're all the way to central Chile. Central Chile has Chile and the other countries of the Andes mountain range have some enormous volcanoes, some fantastically big ones up in the mountains. Fortunately, they don't erupt very often, and that's a good thing for this one. This is the one I chose of all those great choices. This one is Laguna del Maule, that is right on the Argentine border. There's a big lake covering part of the caldera here. And the thing about Laguna del Maule that commanded my attention was that the uplift at this caldera. It's lifting up faster than any other place on Earth. So what does that tell you? The swelling magma chamber underneath. And will that lead to an enormous eruption? I think so. It has the potential for a very large eruption. Let's just hope it keeps swelling for the rest of our time on Earth. And speaking of that, I come to the last volcano I'm going to talk about, which of course is Yellowstone. I talked a little bit about it in the previous talk, but here's a map that shows the caldera for Yellowstone, and you can see how big it is. In fact, it was only discovered when it was seen from satellites. Anyway, there have been super eruptions here, at least 3, the last one being 640,000 years ago. There have also been smaller eruptions in Yellowstone's past. I don't know how big or small they were, but the last one was quite a long time ago, 1350 BC. Where will the next eruption be, and how big will it be, and when? Well, I'll tell you what my guess is. I think it'll be somewhere between 10,000 and 100,000 years from now. But that doesn't mean that I'm right. Certainly the government, the U.S. Geological Survey, the National Park Service, probably other agencies like NASA, the University of Wyoming, the state of Wyoming, Oregon State University, University of Idaho, all those people are crawling over Yellowstone, keeping track of what's happening underneath. And you can see from all those stars and symbols on the map that there are lots of monitoring sites, lots of instrumentation, lots of different kinds of instruments that are monitoring Yellowstone. So if something starts to happen, those instruments ought to pick it up, and the best volcanic minds in our country will figure it out quickly enough. In the meantime, I can recommend an excellent movie for you online. Just Google BBC Supervolcano movie, and you'll see a full-length 2-hour high-res movie on YouTube of a super eruption from Yellowstone. It's an excellent movie, and I recommend it strongly for your entertainment. Okay, well, that's it. I just want to repeat that something I think you see is obvious. Volcanoes are very interesting to me. I hope they are to you, and I hope you've been at least a little bit entertained. These volcanoes are happening worldwide. You know, some of them are real dangerous, some of them are harmless. Anyway, you can find out more about any specific volcano you want. Just go to this site, volcano.si.edu. It's a Smithsonian site. It's encyclopedic. You can type in the name of the volcano you want to know about, and it'll give you several options probably you can choose, and you can see all kinds of information on that or any other volcano that you want. Anyway, thanks very much for attending. I appreciate it. Mr. President, I'd be willing to take a few questions if you think there's time. I'm not sure I remember. That was 2 years ago. That was a long time for an old guy. But I think I was, I just got interested in some volcano that was happening. I had read the book about Pompeii by Robert Harris, I think is the name of the author. And I've read it several times. Pompeii is a fascinating volcano. And this historical novel just really brought it alive for me. And I'd read some other books about volcanoes. The one about Krakatoa. It's a very good book. I can't remember the name of the author. but I recommended it at the end of my last talks. So, and then I saw that supervolcano movie on YouTube I just recommended. And that kind of kindled my interest, and I started looking into it. And then when Kīlauea started doing its thing, that really set me off. I started writing the previous brief about 6 months before I even gave it. And during that time, I had to redo a whole part of it when Kīlauea started doing its thing from Fissure 8. So all of it was a learning process, and I've enjoyed it very much.
I can't remember where I read this, or even if I did, maybe I dreamed it, but are you aware of any research being done about RF energy being given off by volcanoes either just before or as they are erupting?
Well, I got a message from one of our members about that, and I haven't had time to go through and study it. But the answer is really no. But there's more to learn. There's always more to learn. I thought the Sinabung volcano was pretty ugly. It has an ugly name, and it looks ugly because it's all burnt at the top. And but now all you can see is the eruption cloud, and that's pretty ugly too. But you're right. I thought Santa Maria is really spectacularly beautiful, and that's really the reason I included it. I was just fascinated by Santa Maria, even though it's not going to affect any of us for the rest of our lives. I'm quite sure.
It looks very Fiji-like.
Oh,
Fuji. Mount Fuji.
Yes, Fuji is another cone. It's an active volcano, and one of these days it's going to erupt.
And it's very photogenic.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And Mayon is a volcano that tourists flock to take pictures of in the Philippines. That perfect cone, that angle of repose. Dave clued me into that. Thanks, Dave.
There's a question on chat for you.
Yeah, Mike, I can pick that up. Mike, it says, I may have missed this at the beginning of your presentation, but who calculated the VEI scale like those who calculated the scales for hurricanes or tornadoes?
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
And there's a picture being held up. I can't tell what it is. Anyway, for the VEI scale, there's the VEI scale is imperfect. The VEI scale is not everybody is happy with it, because it's said to measure the emissions, the Tephra that is expelled from a volcano. Well, how do you measure that really? It comes out in all different kinds of forms. Some of it goes up into the stratosphere for really large eruptions. Some of it falls down immediately. Some of it becomes pyroclastic flows. Some of it get pitched out in the form of bombs. There was another term that I didn't tell you about. Bombs are big rocks that get flung out of the volcano during eruption. By big, I mean 2.5 inches in diameter or larger. Some are really big. Anyway, so all that stuff gets flung out, and how do you measure or even estimate how much it is? And then how does the VEI scale apply to effluent volcanoes? The amount of lava that was expelled by Kīlauea during its eruption, just from Fissure 8, was the equivalent of approximately the equivalent of a VEI 3 explosive eruption. All that stuff that came flowing downhill, that's expelled by a volcano. Doesn't that count? Well, it's a VEI 0 volcano because it wasn't explosive. So the VEI scale is what we have now, and I really don't know who invented it.
Mike, K4YMA.
Yes, sir.
I was involved in some research on Hekla in Iceland a couple of months before it erupted in
Yes.
70 something. And
Yes.
we were actually putting down retroflectors around the mountain so that aircraft, satellite positioned aircraft, this is before we had our own, you know, anybody had a exact position from their GPS, but we were putting down retroflect. The aircraft would fly over and measure its location with respect to American satellites, and then it'd go back a few weeks later, and it was measuring. I saw some of the research that was being done, the data that was being collected, and it showed that the base of the mountain was rising up, and the peak of the mountain was dropping down. And I don't know what that means about how the bolus is moving under it, but I wasn't really involved in the conclusion of that project. I was just acting as a navigation leader for the field.
Yes, that's fascinating. That the fact that mountains and whole valleys can move and do move. They tilt. The Caldera at Yellowstone tilts. The lake tilts.
Well, we could see one end of the lake.
Water sloshes.
Didn't it look like one end of the lake was emptying? That picture that you had of it?
Oh, that picture. You shouldn't try to infer that from that picture. That's a view from space of. It's a map that could be a view from space, and you couldn't tell whether the lake was sloshing. But they have tilt meters in Yellowstone, every kind of sensor, and people really pay attention to that lake because it does tilt. Sometimes it gets deeper on one end and shallower on the other, and then vice versa. So the Earth is moving under Yellowstone. It seems kind of spooky considering the potential Yellowstone has for a super eruption. But there are others that do that too. They measure the amount of mountains the volcanoes are moving. And what they make out of that, I don't know. That's science, and I wasn't here to talk about science.
This was good stuff. Anybody else have any other questions?
I guess I have a comment.
Go for it.
I did get to see before it blew, Kīlauea. Remember, it had a visitor center there, and you could actually drive around it. And I think that's all gone now. Right?
Well, you can go to the USGS site for the Hawaiian Volcano Observatory, and you can find a lot of resource material on Kīlauea right there. They have pictures, they have archives, they have a lot of information on previous eruptions, going back to the 20s, even for Kīlauea. You can learn a lot from that site. And something they're doing at Kīlauea with that pond that's building in the bottom of the great crater is they're using UAVs to fly around and use instruments to try to measure the temperature of the surface of the water and take samples of the gases that are coming up from the pond. The pond lies between the scientists and the way down to the magma chamber, to the future of Kīlauea. That pond is blocking access. But the pond itself is scientifically interesting. They're trying to determine what chemicals are in the pond. Different parts of the pond are different temperatures. The smoke that comes off the pond impairs the people taking temperatures of the water. So there's a lot going on, and apparently in a volcano that looks to me, and what I say is sleeping. It's sleeping. It's not doing anything. But really it is. And what is it doing under there? What do the earthquakes that come from underneath Kīlauea mean? And they're measuring them. So what do those mean? Well, it's all great for scientists to figure that out. I have no idea how they do it. But from that site, from that Hawaiian Volcano Observatory, the HVO Kīlauea, if you Google that, you'll open the door to a lot of science, a lot of really good website information, and also about Mauna Loa. They've got a lot on Mauna Loa too.
Yeah. Well, I thought the Haleakala was considered to be extinct at this point.
Well, I read about Haleakala. Haleakala apparently is still nominally active, but I think you're right. I don't think we'll ever see another eruption from Haleakala. Haleakala is the volcano on Maui. It's the only nominally active one that's not on the Big Island. But you know, I think the hot spot is not under Maui anymore. It's almost not under the Big Island. I think Kīlauea is going to be the big show in the centuries to come for Hawaiian volcanoes. That eventually even Mauna Loa will fade out.
Isn't there an island forming south of Hawaii now?
Yes, I showed it on my little map.
Okay. I'm sorry, I lost the internet.
It's
before your
Loihi.
show.
The name of the seamount is Loihi. Loihi is erupting underwater, and it's building itself up. I think the best that could be said about Loihi is it is a seamount, but it's going to take thousands of years before Loihi breaks the surface. So none of us are going to see that. What we see is what we've got. Volcanic time stretches out far and away longer than any of us will ever last.
Okay, comment. I found an app for the Android called Quake and Volcanoes, the 3D globe of volcanic eruptions. Kind of interesting.
Okay, thanks.
I'll say it again just for those, somebody might care. Quake and Volcanoes, 3D globe of volcanic eruptions. It does show the active volcanoes.
I don't have one of those little devices, but I found the Smithsonian site to be so complete. The thing that the Smithsonian isn't is timely. I think they're staffed by mainly volunteers down there, and that you have to wait before they're able to post recent information at the Smithsonian site. But for historic information, which is 99% of it, hey, they're great. They're just great.
If you had to put your money on the next volcano that is substantial, what would it be?
Well, I was going to bet on Sinabung. I was almost counting on Sinabung erupting right after I talked, but it beat me to the punch by a week. Sinabung, seriously, folks, Sinabung strikes me as an extremely dangerous volcano. On my little map, on my inset map, I showed it not all that far away from a very large Indonesian city that has about 2 to 3 million people in it. It's not all that far away. So if it should erupt VEI 6 or 7, which I think it has the capability to do, then those people are going to really suffer. Not to mention the communities that are all around the volcano. I'm not sure everybody realizes that Indonesia is the 4th most populous nation on Earth, and that whole island's covered with people. And it's evidenced by the fact that Krakatoa can have a tsunami and kill 400 people, just like that. So if Sinabung were to go 6 or 7, almost unimaginable, but for that volcano, I would say it is imaginable. Because if you remember the inset map, it wasn't very far away from the great caldera of the Toba supervolcano. And I've read online that there is some speculation that Sinabung shares the magma chamber for Toba. Toba was the largest volcanic eruption in the last 2 million years. It's much larger than, well, I shouldn't say much larger, but it's significantly larger than Yellowstone. So that tells you how big Toba is. Toba is a lake that goes on and on. It's visible from space. And in the middle is a great big island that has been pushed up by the refilling magma chamber. So what do you think about that? Is Toba going to come back someday? And someday, maybe millions of years from now? Probably. I think probably, maybe not, but anyway, so there's a big magma chamber under there, and if Sinabung taps off of it, then Sinabung has an unlimited source of magma. So if I had to worry about one volcano above all others, that would have been it. And for a smaller eruption, I would say Vesuvius. Vesuvius is the one I think that's going to kill a lot of people sometime in our future. Maybe not mine. I hope not yours either, but sometime. Campi Flegrei is a guess. If I had to guess, Campi Flegrei will sometime go off. Another VEI3, a fairly small eruption, just really burn the pizza in Naples, but not be a catastrophe like a VEI5 from Vesuvius. What do you think? What are your opinions about that? You've seen all this, and you're all very technically competent people. You know about tectonic plates and volcanoes and earthquakes. What do you think?
Mike, I think you've given us something else to worry about if we're worried about COVID-19.
Mike, I have one thing that makes me very nervous. I remember when you gave the talk on the pandemic.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my God. And I'm afraid what's going to happen is one of these days we're going to have a major event. And one of the things the thing that scares me is what if we get a VEI7 in Naples and that one? What would happen? I'm worried that would just wipe out the whole country of Italy, if not or half of Europe.
Well, VEI7 at Campi Flegrei, there are people that speculate about this very thing. What would happen if there were a VEI7 at Campi Flegrei? Well, like you said, it would be a catastrophe for southern Italy and the countries along the Adriatic Sea, probably for other countries in southern Europe. But a VEI7 anywhere in the world is going to be a catastrophe for so many people, for so many parts of the world. The last VEI7 was in 1815, and it was right down there in Indonesia. It wasn't on Sumatra or Java, but it was near Java. It was the Tambora. And if you look up Tambora on the web, you can find several small documentaries, video documentaries. Some of them are not very good. The reason for that is that it was in 1815, and in 1815 that the information systems are not what they were in 1883.
The U.S. was still at war.
Well, 1815 was the year of the Battle of Waterloo. But 1816 is known for the year without a summer, precisely because of the Tambora eruption in Indonesia. And this year without a summer was mainly recorded in Europe and also the United States. So 1816 was a disaster. In China, there was famine. This VEI-7 affected climate around the world and badly. If there were another VEI-7, and I don't care where, in the Aleutians, in Indonesia, or in the Andes Mountains, it would still be a catastrophe for the Earth. We're not even talking about a super eruption.
Oh God! I mean, what I'm afraid of is if we did a VEI-8, that would be like that. There are people that speculate that would be a life ender, like a meteorite hitting us.
Well, since you mention it, when Toba erupted, what, 74,500 years ago, and there were human populations in many parts of the world in those times, and there was popular a few years ago a theory of the Toba, what was it called, the Toba annihilation event or some such thing. Anyway, there were those who were pushing the theory that the human population was reduced down to a tiny number, and from that tiny number, all existing human populations have evolved. That theory has pretty much gone out of favor. That the Toba super eruption event did not kill off most of the human populations in the world. To be sure, it made it really hard on a lot of them. The climate was terribly affected by the Toba eruption, but for killing off all the human populations, I have great faith in human populations being very robust, being able to survive the worst of events. I'm not so worried about another super eruption. I think it's going to be another million years before Toba is ready to go again. And for Yellowstone, maybe another 100,000 years. So I don't think we need to worry about them. If we're going to have a VEI-8, I think it's going to come from the Andes Mountains. Maybe that Laguna del Maule. That's what I think. And please don't pay any attention to what I think, because remember, I'm not a scientist. I'm not a volcanologist. I'm just a radio amateur. What do I know?
You certainly still know more about volcanoes than I do.
Well, if this was useful entertainment, I'm happy.
This is good. Mike, thank you so much. Excellent presentation. I always love seeing your volcano stuff. It's gives me a whole other thing to lie awake at night thinking about and worrying about that I have absolutely no control over. So, and somebody pointed out the pandemic. You were right. Let's hope you're right that maybe we wait a long time.
No, about the pandemic, I hope we don't have a flu pandemic on top of the one we've got. It's entirely possible.
Well, it's actually inhibited by the fact that we're isolating more than we would for an ordinary flu, and it makes the flu that much harder to catch.
Yes, one would hope.
Well, good stuff.
Well, we're gonna have flu anyway. There's the seasonal flu that comes up starting in October or so, and we have it every year. This year is not going to be any different.
Yeah, compounding that with actual.
So getting a flu shot is going to be just as important this year as it is any year.
Yep.
So
possibly more important to make sure there's enough room at the hospitals for everybody with COVID.
What a frightful thought that is.
Right.
All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for your attention and your enthusiasm. It did me a world of good to share the topic with you and share the enjoyment. So hey, great, thanks everyone.